Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Garrick?
I'm doing well. I'm at ASCCC plenary, so working out of the hotel today.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah. How are you doing?
I just got back from are you familiar with IEPI PRTs?
Yep.
Yeah, I just got back from a visit, so I am
Very
exhausted.
good. Where'd you go to?
Contra Costa.
Very cool.
They're doing things with data literacy.
Awesome. Hi, Suzanne.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
Good,
It's
good. Glad it's
Friday.
no. And Tuesday's a holiday, so yes.
Yeah, I know it's strange having a Tuesday holiday. So we work Monday, and then you have Tuesday off. I'm just hoping there's enough stores open so I can go do all the errands.
Hmm.
That would be
Yeah, a lot of places don't close for veterans. I've got like appointments and stuff, so kind of
yeah.
works out.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of my hope. We don't get too many of those miscellaneous holidays that also overlap with businesses being open.
Hmm.
So take full advantage of it.
And I have to say, as having worked in STEM where we have labs like one day a week, having a holiday not be a Monday is really
Yeah,
nice because our
that is
Monday
true.
labs are always just way off. Yeah.
Yeah, the spring semester especially gets impacted.
Hmm.
Hello, Christy. Welcome. I have made you co-host as well, so you can get all the pop-ups of who's in the waiting room.
Good afternoon, Garrett. Thank you.
You know, if I was smart, I would just turn off the waiting room right now. That would be much easier on myself, considering the link was only sent to all of you.
Hopefully, no Zoom bombers.
Hopefully not. We'll give it another minute before we start. It automatically started the recording today when I logged in at about 11:55. So when you review the recording, you'll see me sitting here for 5 minutes, just, staring at the screen, fixing my hair, all the good things. Laura, you got that one. You got that one.
Trying
You're
to
welcome.
keep up with all our popping ins, Garrett.
I'm doing my best. Moses, welcome. I just made you co-host as well.
Thank you, Garrett. Good afternoon, everyone.
So nice to see so many squares today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will share screen as I let people continue to funnel in. That way Christy and Moses can get us going, and we'll plow right through the agenda today.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this November first Friday. I cannot believe how fast the year is flying and the semester is just going so quickly. While we're still sort of populating and having people pop in, before we sort of officially start, I just want to kind of start with a tradition that we have in my house, and with some of my friends, that we celebrate the November as the month of gratitude. And so I always like to start every day with just sort of sharing something that I'm grateful for. And I feel that it's very appropriate today to share how grateful that I am to members of the DE, especially the DE coordinators community. Because way back when in 2018, 2019, when I was new to this role, I was lucky to fall into DECO and had just some of the most amazing mentors possible. I know that Lisa Beach is not on here. Candace Knudsen, I think Knudsen is sometimes pops in and out. Joanna, I don't know if any of you remember her, but I was so fortunate to have some really amazing mentors and examples of just willingness to share about what was happening in this world and kind of give me places to find resources. And so just for my today's day of gratitude, I just want to say how grateful that I am for this community, past and present as well, from back in the day, from my early interactions with DECO, like I said. And then one other person who just popped up on my screen that I'm going to mention is Marina. A couple of years ago, I was really struggling with my some administration issues, and she really helped me sort of kind of wade through some of that. And so also a thank you and a gratitude going towards her as well. So thank you for letting me take just a few moments to start our meeting with my day of gratitude. Candace, I hear that you just joined, and you were mentioned, I think, before you joined, that how grateful I am for your mentorship when I originally joined ECHO and just got into my role as a DE coordinator, and just like a little wee, brand new, still shiny, bright, and smelling of that new car smell. So thank you so much. So, all right, everyone, thank you. It looks like the attendance sheet, we'll go ahead and move on with our agenda because we do have a lot of interesting things to talk about today. So first thing at the top of our agenda, we have our attendance sheet. So if you would please go ahead and mark yourself as present, we would very much appreciate that. And then thank you, Moses. It looks like Moses put it into the chat. Thank you so much. So the first thing that we're going to do today is talk about your homework. And don't worry, we're not giving out demerits if you didn't get to your homework, but we would like to talk about that a little bit to kind of start us off. And we're going to have a little poll that we're going to go over as well, and just to kind of help give us some sort of reference points to how we want to have this conversation, this committee moving forward. And then we're going to have some of our regular updates from our Instructure folks as well. And then I believe we have open sort of conversation after that. So I think we have a really great meeting planned for you all today. So let's go ahead and talk homework. So last time we were together, I asked you to come today to sort of be ready to talk a little bit about AI, but really specifically looking at what are the tools in Canvas that you would like to have that might help faculty as well as students and staff, or maybe tools that you're already using that you're finding have been really helpful on your campus for your faculty and your students and your staff? I know there's so many tools that are populating out there right now, and it's really hard. Like, I don't have the funding to do trials for all of them. I also don't have the bandwidth, just myself or in my department, to check into all of them to see if they maintain FERPA compliance, if they are ADA compliant, what their data security situation looks like as well. So really hearing from those of you who are out in the field doing this work, it would be really nice to see what you have to share, what you've tried, what you can recommend, what you do not recommend. So that's sort of where we're thinking that this conversation could go today. So I know that Garrick put up I think, is this Mentimeter? Yes, menti.com. So if you would please join us on menti.com and kind of share with us what your thoughts are.
And if you don't want to use the QR code, I got that link for you in the chat.
And I don't know, Moses, if you'd like to add to that.
No, you did a great job queuing this up. I think that I will just say we reflected on some of the conversations going on across both CVC communication platform and Deco. So we pivoted this slightly to have it in open as possible.
All right. Shall we give everyone just a couple more moments? How are we looking on responses? I see that our Menti is moving and grooving today. Changing. Let's see some of the things we have up there. Conmingo. I'll be interested to hear if that's a thumbs up or a thumbs down, because I've heard some mixed messages from my faculty. Notebook LM, that is one of the ones that I thought was really interesting as well. I have had some faculty who are requesting to have it integrated into Canvas, and we haven't quite gotten there yet. So I'll be interested in hearing about someone's experience with Notebook LM. Brainstorming, whisper transcription, GPT. I have not heard of that one. So that one's staying pretty big as well. Gamma, Question Well, 3C Media's popped up. PlayLab, RSI agent. So I will be wondering if we've got some faculty here on campus who are in that PlayLab pilot. So I have a lot of faculty who are in that pilot who are pretty happy with that experience and building some things in there. I'm looking forward to see what other faculty around the state have come up with as well. Let's see, YouTube captions with Gemini, faculty share out, Nectar's Canvas LTI, and another one for Nectar. Okay. So it looks like our Menti has kind of settled a bit. So who'd like to just sort of share out? We're just gonna kind of be loosey-goosey today, not, raise your hands, unmute yourself. We're all friends here. Anyone like to go first?
Can you repeat the question, Christy?
I can, Laura. So, would you like to chat about any of these things that have popped up on our menti.com? Like, is there one of these that's worked for your faculty on campus or worked for your students on campus? Are you looking to utilize one of these resources and would like to hear someone else's experience with those resources? Those sorts of things.
So I've used Conmigo, the teacher tools in Canvas, and it has helped me take what I thought were super clear directions and make them more clear for my students. I've also had it help me build rubrics. I do wish that the Canvas integration was actually an integration and not just a iframe. Like where it helps me build a rubric. I wish that it could be like send it to the rubric area and then I could create a rubric without having to build it completely from scratch. And then I've been using Notebook LM in my class for the last year, I think, but I don't have, I want to look at what the data is, and I'll do that in a minute. Like I want to see how many students are actually, because I did it where I uploaded the audio podcast into the reading pages, and I said you have an option to listen to the audio podcast, you have an option to watch the video summary that Notebook LM creates, and then do the reading. I'm curious to see how many students have actually, because I did it with Canvas Studio, and I want to look at some of the insights on that to see if like this amazing idea that I thought I had, how students actually implemented the use of it. So I could be like, "Woo, cool idea," but yeah, so I like it.
And I would be interested in hearing what, after you dig into that a little bit, to see what those metrics look like, to see what really happened. You know, because that's always interesting, because sometimes I feel like we have faculty, and I've been guilty of this myself, where I start this new cool thing, and then I never wrap back around to look at what was its effectiveness. Did it actually do what I think it was going to do, or did it do something different than I thought it was going to do? And so it would be very interesting to sort of hear how you landed, in all your spare time.
Well, I am in the Canvas admin training right now for data, so I think that it applies to that homework too. So I think I'm going to
Yeah.
tie that all together.
That's a great idea. I did something very similar when I completed that portion of the certificate. So yeah, that's a great idea. Like, work smarter, not harder. Thank you. So any other thoughts on Conmingo, or just other thoughts on some of those tools that came up on our Menti, or maybe something you weren't quite ready to share on the Menti that you'd like to just talk about a little bit? So Vanessa mentions in chat that she's getting a lot of feedback from faculty about clear directions, that I guess I'm assuming that it's improving the clarity of instruction for assignments, assessments for students. Thank you, Vanessa. Okay. All right, Sharon is sharing with us in chat about Play Labs. Sharon, do you want to share out loud with us?
I think our campus has been doing a lot of Play Lab little bots, which is great. I just love how easy it is to create one of those bots, to be truthful. But like our tutors, my faculty hat is working with our tutors in the tutoring center, and so we have a little play bot where they can practice working with a student and practice their empathetic guidance and support, and not giving the right answer, but giving tools. So I've been having a lot of fun with just that practice, and I think other faculty are using that as well. It'd be interesting to see if how it's been supported.
I'm also interested in, and I know I need to dig a little further on this, but once we're sort of closer, like once the Play Lab pilot has been going on for a little while longer, and more faculty have had a chance to complete these bots, like, where are those resources going to live? Like, how are we going to have access to those? So for example, Sharon, if someone, you're from your faculty, or you create this super cool interesting bot, how will we be able to get access to that? Like, will everyone in the community be able to have access to that, so that we don't recreate that wheel?
Yeah, that's a good thought. We have a Canvas page in our DE Hub where we share everybody's bots, but it's for just our campus. So it's not sharing amongst everybody in the state.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really how most of ours are as well, that it's something that's being shared on campus and across district, but not shared out more broadly than that. I think it might be interesting if we develop something that we would be able to share out wider when faculty are willing and able. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Play Lab, Vanessa? Or a different thought?
Yes, thank you for allowing me to share. I wanted to share that in the month of October, I launched these Tech in 10 sessions where I conducted these bite-sized, high-impact tutorials for 10 minutes. They start at 12 and they're just no longer than 10 minutes long. And they take place every Tuesday on Zoom. And so each Tuesday for the month of October, we touched on an AI tool from in Canvas. So we did course and inbox AI translation 1 week. The next week was discussion summaries. Then I featured Conmingo for teaching. And on the last week, we did Smart Search. And it was really awesome to see that now when I go in to support faculty in their Canvas courses, I see Smart Search at the very top of their course navigation menu. So these AI tools are not only effective, but faculty are adopting them. And I like that, I share them in a bite-sized manner so that, it's not a long workshop, but they are adopting them. They're able to enable them if they need to be enabled within that Tech in 10 session, and they are using them. And the same feedback for that Conmingo. I had our academic senate president said, I really like the Conmingo tool for clear direction. She's like, what I thought were clear directions, I popped them into the Conmingo tool and they made it so much more clearer for my students, and my students were able to really understand what I was trying to communicate. So that was a really great impact on students for that particular tool, and faculty really do enjoy it.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Vanessa. If you don't mind asking, how did you choose which topics to cover over your 4 or 5 Tuesdays?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. So there was a memo that was sent out by the CCCO, I believe. I can't remember which, there's so many C's in the different organizations, but there was a memo sent out regarding the AI tools, and I said, we're taking all of them and we're scheduling them all in. So that was the initial one for October, but I also include any updates like the YouTube content migration that we have available now. That's going to be covered next Tuesday. So it really just depends on what's coming up and what's new. And then also at the end of each Tech in 10 session, I'll post a QR code and get feedback from the faculty of what do they also want to learn about. And I do get a lot of feedback for AI tools. Sometimes I feel like you're not really sure if they're ready for AI, but then it's like some are just like want more and more and more. So it's like, I think their feelings about it are changing over time.
I think it's interesting that you point that out, because I think for many of us on our campuses, we have sort of the early folks who are like they play with anything and everything, and they're just always interested in the latest and greatest. But those are my faculty who've been using AI now for a couple of years, and it's slowly starting to get into more of the early adopters. And so we still haven't reached mainstream or the holdouts yet, but it's slowly moving its way there. I agree. So I think sometimes we get more feedback once we hit some of those later stages as well, because my early adopters usually love everything. So it's kind of nice to hear from some of the later adopters as well. Thank you.
I wanted to add one last thing about Conmingo is that what I really like and what I see about it is the fact that it's integrated into Canvas, but it's easy enough for your beginners to use and adopt. It's right within Canvas, and a lot of it is like choosing from the drop down fields, and it's very user friendly. They don't have to go out to chat. They don't have to go out and find another tool somewhere to use it. It's right there. And so I've noticed that that's been very helpful, especially for beginning AI adopters.
Very nice. Have you found that you need to, has this become training intensive for you at this point, or do you feel like the bite size kind of give enough for this round of faculty to sort of get started?
I do think it's enough. I will say that the Conmingo one, because there's 20 tools that are, categorized within 5 main areas, that one I like ran over 1 minute, but I only covered, I think it was like I only covered one category and I just showed 2 examples. So, it was kind of like, feel free to go in and play around and see, which categories or which tools would work best for you or that you find interest in. But that one had quite a bit, so I did not get to go through each one, but just kind of highlighted some basic ones so they can see what it can do.
Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you for letting me put you on the spot.
No problem.
I appreciate it. All right, so let's see. Did we have anything in particular in the chat that we wanted to address? I see Moses, you were in the chat a little bit. Is there anything that we should bring up at this point from the chat?
Yeah, I mean, Bob was asking the question about AI in college operations, but not in academic instructional areas. And well, I think that that has been a little productive sidebar. It's a little outside of CCMS scope. Um, and then I did see Viv saying campus faculty are quite resistant to AI tools. Well, I'm sure that's going to be uneven for all of us. I'm sure that we all have at least some faculty who are resistant to AI tools. It's been a complicated conversation to be sure. But I think that is, yeah, no, there's nothing else kind of directly connected to our larger prompt here. But
Okay,
this has been really great.
thank you, Moses. All right, was there anything else anyone wanted to? I think we're about at our sort of time for the segment. But we have a couple of more minutes if there's anything that someone wants to share that really popped out for them. I know that the notebook LM seemed to be quite large on our Menti, so I wasn't sure if anyone wanted to share a specific example or perhaps a particular story maybe about use of that on your campus.
Oh no, Laura has shared out the data report there. Greg.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to share a Notebook LM experience. I was playing with I uploaded my syllabus and created a notebook, and I was really excited about the podcast feature, right, where they have the 2 voices, and I listened to it. And what I got out of it was that my message that I intend to give to my students came through loud and clear. That as they were talking about me, they said, I mean, they were fake voices, and that was a little creepy. But I really liked that what they said about what I wrote reflected what I intended to write, which made me feel really good. And so I resolved that anytime I'm going to be reviewed as a professor, I'm just going to do that, share with them that podcast recording and say, here's all you need to know about how I do my job.
Thank you, Gregory. That was one of the features that is on my list to play with as well, is that podcaster one. So it's nice to hear a little bit of feedback on that. Thank you. All right, let's see. Laura has not had the best experience with the Play Lab, or excuse me, with the Notebook LM. And then Kathy shares that she uploaded the OER textbook chapters to Notebook LM and then create videos, podcasts so her students are loving it. So excellent. Thank you. And thank you for sharing with us. That's, as I said, that is on my list to try. So, all right. Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate your chatting a little bit about sort of how we want to see tools coming into Canvas and how they can help our students and how they can help our faculty. What we'd like to do is to bring this back every so often, just to kind of sort of keep this sort of fresh discussion as we're moving towards the end of our time together as a group, and we're sort of preparing to give recommendations for Garrett and Marina to carry forward to instructors. So we'll bring this back again and chat about it again. And we appreciate really very much the positive feedback that we've gotten today on it. So I'll go ahead and close that out. And then we're going to invite Kelly to talk a little bit about those instructor updates, and perhaps Gus, although I didn't see Gus on here. So.
Hey, thanks, Christy. I think we wanted to just start by going over the portfolio update. Make sure you're aware of what's coming with that, because it's, in my opinion, it's more pressing than some of the updates that Gus can share later about November. So if we can jump into that, and I am going to share a link here as well. Oh, geez. You guys are one step ahead of me. Thank you. So yeah, that is the blog post that I wanted to for sure draw everyone's attention to regarding the updated portfolio experience at Canvas. Whereas the majority of the features lately that we've released, particularly the AI features, have all been 100% admin opt-in and then a teacher opt-in as well. This portfolio as of November 15th is going to be a little different, where it will be turned on in everyone's instance. So definitely wanted to get ahead of this one and make sure you're aware of that happening and some options you have. Is it possible for me to share my screen real quick? Thank you. Oh, sending a request to share. Thank you. Okay, so I'll show you a little bit about what the portfolio is here in a second, but I wanted to just alert you to some options. Now, again, so we've had kind of a basic Canvas portfolio experience for some time within Canvas. This is now the updated portfolio that we've been working on for some time, and again, releasing it on the 15th of November. As I said, defaulted to on the 15th of November. So I wanted to at least walk through some options you have there if that may or may not work for you. So I'm in beta, and you can all turn this on in beta now if you would like, if you want to get an idea of what the new portfolio experience looks like. So it's handled here with a developer key that in beta, you'll have to go and switch it on right now. Again, in production on the 15th, this will just come through for you. If I go to my apps section in settings, I'm going to find portfolio again. So again, depending on what your feelings are or the readiness of your school for a new portfolio experience, I think in a lot of cases, you can probably just let it go. It's going to be found in the user account menu, so people can kind of come across it as they'd like. But as opposed to completely disabling the tool through developer keys in production, you can simply come in here to your app placements and just uncheck the user navigation. So that would leave the app installed, but essentially just kind of hiding it from your users, I guess, until a time you're more ready to work with it. Maybe you've done some announcements on it and given your users more advanced notice of that portfolio coming. So that would be an option for you to take in your production environment after the 15th. So if you do want it hidden, if you don't think your users would like it at this point, you will need to take some action. If you're okay with them coming across it and starting to use this new feature, perfect, that works great. It will come through. It will be defaulted here in, if I go to my account, maybe, there we go. So it would be listed here, portfolio. Going back to this blog post, there's some key dates here for you to keep in mind as well. So generally available is this new portfolio experience on the 15th of November. Looking to next year, June 30th of next year is when the old portfolio will be retired and removed from Canvas. So there are opportunities here as well for you to let your users know how to get any materials out of the portfolio they had been using and get it into the new environment. So again, I will happy to answer any questions, but I think this is a great new tool and something that you could again start playing with in beta now if you kind of wanted to get a week ahead of it and see what the experience would be like for your users. And we can share some guides as well on how to use the portfolio and everything like that. But I think it would be a good idea for you to at least walk through this and see what you think about the new feature. Okay, I'm going to try and backtrack here. Oh, Gus is helping me out here a little bit. Yeah, so Greg, I can go back to the app placement there, but it is just kind of you can set it basically at being able to see it in your account navigation or global navigation as well if you wanted to. So you have those options, but it is kind of a root account install tool. So you'd have to manage it based off of that thinking.
And Kelly, just
Uncool.
for clarification, it shows
Yeah.
up by default in the account, but it could be turned on in global, right?
Oh, yes. Good question, Moses. So yes, the November 15th enablement will come with what I'm showing you here. If I go to my account, I will see portfolio as an option. You could further add it to other areas if you wanted to, but just the account navigation will be the default.
I think for a lot of us, actually, the big thing is not having something else automatically showing up in global because it can get a little busy over there. So yeah, that's
Very
great.
true. Yeah, and there's a report in your account settings. You can see how many people had been using the old ePortfolio, and that may inform your decision on whether it's a time to just let the new one roll out, or if you want to take your time on that as well. But yeah, it's again gone through a lot of testing, a lot of different user groups to come up with what we're showing now in the portfolio. So we do feel like it's a really good tool ready to be used. The considerations are just timing for your user base if what works best for you. One more reminder, again, as of right now, you could turn it on in beta environment. It does involve using, like going into developer keys, switching them on, and adding an app that way. If that's something you'd like to do and you're having trouble with it, please reach out to Gus or I, and we're happy to help you get it turned on in beta if you want to take a peek at that. And then, yeah, if anything else comes up, please send us questions your way. Again, this was just one we definitely want to get ahead of with you, as again, most of our features have been just 100% opt-in lately, where this one is going to be turned on for you, and you'll need to take action otherwise.
One other question I've got. This is a little bit different in the sense that there is a potential kind of independent student use case outside of a course context. And that's a weird lead in for the actual question I have, which is what can we expect, but not that weird lead in, because we've got two different audiences here. From a standpoint of training resources, whether it be from the faculty side or student side, is there anything we can kind of expect to be rolling out to help people wrap their head around how they might want to use it?
Good question. I think outside of community guides, I don't think we're gonna find anything more robust than that.
Yeah, I would echo that, Moses. And then as well as I think the blog post that was recently posted in the chat does describe some use cases that people may want to consider this tool for. Yeah, I mean, it's a very brief section just talking about like some real world use cases, but nothing much beyond that.
Okay, that may
I'm
be something for this committee to take up in terms of how we might want to extend some potential thinking or support about that.
And I just put another link in the chat, Moses, as kind of an addition to this portfolio is an added teacher use case as opposed to just students showcasing their work. And so the guide in the chat may be of particular interest as it is kind of a new thought behind portfolio and some new usage compared to what we have had in the past. Again,
Yeah,
hopefully
absolutely. Absolutely. I
that
think that
helps.
when I saw the kind of two different portfolio options in there, that was part of what was pushing my question was, yeah, the student
Sure.
use case, sure, we'll need to figure out how to support students, but that is a little bit more straightforward in a sense. Whereas the faculty use case, I'm glad to see that there's something out there. Craig, you've had your hand up.
Thanks, Moses. A question I have is about the students. So two questions. One is, will students have access to their portfolios post affiliation with the institution? How will they do that? Because I assume that that's the case. And then the second question is, uh, the can an instructor make a student portfolio an assignment? And like I want to give my students an assignment, go create a portfolio. Here's the stuff I want you to include, and then submit that portfolio to me. Obviously, they could submit the URL or the PDF file, whatever. But if there is there an instructor, is that an assignment option? And I think maybe related to that, and this is the kind of a third question related to both questions, is I know that these portfolios can include artifacts from multiple courses. How does it manage? Like I'm imagining that my students are taking a capstone course for a degree or certificate, and they want to create a portfolio. There's an assignment maybe for that course to create a portfolio summarizing all their learning at the institution. But if some of their learning, some of those artifacts were assignment submissions in other classes, how will the current instructor, the current classmates, the potential future employers or transfer institutions or mom and dad and abuela, how will they be able to access the artifacts that perhaps were assignment submissions, in some other class?
Um, Sorry, Greg, lots of questions there. Let me put this guide in here as well that talks about kind of the student view of the portfolio. There are teacher assigned portfolio instructions, so there is some options there with teachers assigning it out to make that happen. I know that there is an option to take your portfolio and export it to something like LinkedIn. So you could build within the Canvas portfolio and then push it out to that platform. I believe, and I can do some more research, but I believe it still functions as the old portfolio where a student would need to take some action to either export or push it to something like LinkedIn, where they wouldn't be able to get back into Canvas to use it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Greg. I don't know if I got all your questions there.
No, I think the links that you have will be helpful, and I know that these questions have been asked in the community in this discussion as this has been
Okay.
developed. So I'm sure that the questions at least are documented somewhere.
Yeah, and Greg, I will just add to that, post-graduation, the student would lose access, at least right within Canvas, obviously as they lose access to their instance. But they would be able to export it, either PDF or HTML. And so that is something that you would want to note if a student is curating their own portfolio.
Oh, okay. Then if I can ask a quick follow-up on that, Gus, is post-graduation, are for the student created portfolios archived at all, so that if we had a reason, if a student had a reason to re-access, either I forgot to export it or this opportunity came up, I would love to share that portfolio. I didn't when I was a student. How is there a policy for how long those, all those index pages will be?
That's a great question. That one I'm not sure, but we can sync up with our product team and find out if they are at all archived or still accessible in some way.
Thank you.
I feel comfortable saying, Greg, that it would just live with the user that user account. It would live in your instance. It would only be gone upon deletion of that user. That's just me going off of past experience. I haven't seen that explicitly with the new portfolio, but yeah, Gus and I can get 100% on that one. I think it would be more up to the school's archiving policies as opposed to anything that Canvas does about getting rid of users. All right. Thanks, Christy. Thanks, Moses. Please let us know, though.
think we've
Would
got
love to hear
question
feedback.
from Paul
Oh,
echoing Greg. Will assignments or other items tied to courses be available in a portfolio once that course has concluded after the student no longer has access to the course? So, you know, they've added this thing to their portfolio, the course closed, they wouldn't normally be able to get back to it via the course, but they want it to be. So I think that was one of the questions in Greg's set of questions that maybe wasn't quite addressed.
okay. I mean, I can run through some tests on this because that would be, there's a workflow of adding evidence is what our portfolio calls it. And one of
Yeah.
those options is to add something from a course or something like that. So
Feel like my gut says this is like
I would imagine that once you add that as evidence, it lives in your portfolio.
Yeah, and not just in the course, or
Yeah.
at the very least, not access restricted by the course. Yeah, if you can get back to us on that, that would be great.
Sure.
Yeah, Paul, that should be the case. I know that you're not able to add in artifacts or assignments from courses that have already concluded. You won't have access to those. But if they have been added to your portfolio, they should be retained there. But we can check just to see what that would look like in practice.
Honestly, love for anyone to get in there and play around with it, though. If you have additional questions as you're taking a peek, definitely work with our team to get some answers and clarity on anything you're seeing.
Thank you, Kelly. I don't think we have any more questions in the comments at this point. One interesting comment from Laura that might be an argument to keep it on the global nav instead of just in the user area. So something to consider as we move forward in this process. And I believe up next, Moses is going to cover a couple of the items on the agenda, starting with YouTube migration and then play pause it. So
Absolutely. These are both kind of quick. They're essentially info items by any other name. Well, we don't operate by that structure typically with this committee. So first, one of my faculty brought to my attention something about the YouTube migration. And when they initially presented it to me, I kind of wanted to brush it off because they were saying, hey, you know, when you migrate a YouTube video in, it loses the information. So if a student's trying to use it for citation later on in their work, and I'm just thinking to myself, well, just model good practice for them and put the citation on the page. Like, there you go, that problem's taken care of. But as they went on, it breaks the link back to YouTube. And a big part of that, the bigger part of that, is actually the transcript. That for a lot of use cases, they want students to be able to actually access that transcript to kind of pull quotes with their work or otherwise to be able to engage with it in that kind of a way. And because the way that it works currently is the transcript, unlike a Canvas Studio video, it's not like ported in. I know that at last year's InstructureCon, there was some talk about there potentially down the road being the ability to generate new captions inside of Studio for YouTube videos. But since that doesn't exist, basically you've got a transcriptless video if you do the YouTube migration. So I wanted to make everybody kind of aware of that as you're encouraging your faculty to possibly adopt the tool, that there is that limitation. And if that is a concern, they might not be ready to adopt it yet. And, you know, obviously we'll keep an eye out for if instructor gets to a point where there is a separate set of captions, a separate caption file that is studio native, because that would resolve that particular concern. So otherwise, just kind of being aware of that as a challenge that specific faculty might run into. And this happened to be English faculty who were mostly rubbing up against this problem, and I think that probably won't surprise most of you that this wasn't something being, brought to my attention in relation to like a stats course. I'm not throwing any shade. I'm not saying that a stats faculty might not be asking their students to engage the transcript, but you get the idea. So I don't know if anybody had any questions about that. It's pretty straightforward.
Moses, you do have a comment from Helen about.
It's related to what Moses was talking about because it
Yeah.
isn't actually living in your studio account. You don't have access to the things that you may be used to, one of which is the captioning tool.
Yeah.
So it automatically brings over whatever captions were on it in YouTube, and those are usually the auto-generated captions, which aren't helpful to us.
Yeah, to be sure, it could complicate from that accessibility checking standpoint for folks. It could complicate the process of like being able to ferret out whether those captions are auto-gen and if they're accurate enough and so on. Absolutely. All right. The other quick update I had, just to make sure it's kind of on everyone's radar, because it wasn't on mine until my LMS admin, Hema, sent me a Teams chat, or maybe it was on Slack. I don't know. We use both for reasons that are beyond any of our comprehension. That there has been a change with PlayLab, that it is not going away. We are not losing PlayLab. PlayPosit, I mean, sorry. Too many P products. Now we have two in the mix that start with Play. Except we don't, because it turns out PlayPosit is getting a name change to WeVideo. And from what I understand, I have not explored this yet. It has a different workflow for creating interactive elements. I don't know if they're still going to be called bulbs. But the important thing that I was able to confirm is that for faculty who have existing PlayPosit bulbs, those will come in just fine. It'll functionally show up as just a name change. But if you weren't aware that that is happening, you probably should be aware of it since it's within the ecosystem, and you might potentially have faculty freaking out about it when that is finalized. And you can tell them it's okay, take a deep breath, everything's fine, all of your stuff is still there. It just has a different name now. So that was my other info item for y'all. Oh, right, which makes me think of WeChat. I mean, hey, there's a certain point where you get product name saturation, and what are you going to do? There was a point at El Camino when we got PlayPosit where we had Panopto and Pronto. It was like, oh no, all of the P tools. There's a lot of confusion going on during that particular moment. So yeah.
So Moses, Laura mentioned in the chat that there's an option to use the tool cog to select which captions show up through the YouTube migration tool. I have not done that myself, so.
I
That's
found
good
it
to
on
know.
accident. Because I was
Those are
like,
the
no, I
best
know I
discoveries.
uploaded captions to these YouTube videos, like that were accurate captions. Why did they come over with auto captions? And it's not intuitive, but if you do have the regular, like if you have uploaded captions to your YouTube videos, you can delete the auto caption file, and then the only file will be the one that you uploaded. I'll try and find a screenshot of the cog and the choices.
And Laura, I think I saw your ticket run through and that they fixed it so that if another version was captioned, it's going to choose that one to be the auto one first. Like it's not going to be the auto, it's going to be your English captions. If I saw
Karen
that
reads the
ticket.
concluded tickets that I forgot.
I'm just glad you submit the tickets. I don't mind reading them.
Thank you, Laura. That's really good to know. All right, I think if there are no more questions about those two items, we are ready to move on to the additional instructor updates from Gus and Kelly.
Cool. Thank you, Christy. I am happy to show you guys essentially the remaining items that we will be rolling out as part of our November 15th release. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen. So essentially, we have three new AI features all being rolled out 2 Saturdays from now. One of them is going to be, and I think we've demoed this maybe a couple of months back, but our product team had to pull it back since they needed to fine tune and make some adjustments to this tool. But this one is going to be the inbox translation tool, which keep in mind, it is an account level feature option. It's the only AI feature option that we have at the account level. So all of the other ones that I'll be talking about today are course level ones. But for this tool, you would have to enable it either for your entire instance or not. Um, so fairly straightforward tool. If you are composing a message, if you've enabled that feature option, you will have this little toggle to include the translated version of that message. You have about a dozen languages for the time being, which you can select from. You'll go ahead and just hit the little Translate Ignite AI button, and you can select if you want it to show first or if you want it to show second. So kind of a nice feature option for folks who speak different languages or have a preferred second language. Um, and then I did want to clarify one thing. I know Greg is here and he was in our previous meeting and we were kind of emailing back and forth about what that recipient experience will look like. And so I did want to clarify, Greg, that it sounds like this tool is really mainly designed for composing messages. So it really only enables the sender to include that translated version before sending it to the recipient. So the recipient won't necessarily have the option to translate it into another language. So just wanted to clarify that since I gave you some misinformation via email. Um, so just FYI there. And then another feature option is going to be our translations for discussions and announcements. So these are going to be course level feature options, or rather just a single feature option. So I'm just in one of my courses here in the announcements area. So if you've got this enabled, you can just use the little three-dot menu up here to translate the announcement. Again, similarly, you'll select the language you want it to go in, and then you just hit the translate, and it'll provide you the translation. So pretty straightforward. And then for the third option, really works in similar fashion for discussions as well. Again, you're using that same kebab menu. You'll go ahead and hit the translate discussion. You'll select your language and you'll hit translate. And it'll translate pretty much everybody's message. Might take a little bit, but eventually should get it translated. You can then reset it and close out of it. So those are our various translation tools that we have rolling out. Aside from this, we also have a discussion insights tool that is coming out. So you can see right over here, there's this Go to Insights button. And this one will differ a little bit from the previous discussion summaries AI tool that we previously pushed out. The discussion summary one will summarize all of the students' posts collectively and kind of provide the instructor with a summary of what everybody is talking about. The insights one will essentially evaluate individual contributors' posts to the discussion. So you can see over here, obviously I had one that was just gibberish. The reply was too short, so it'll tell you as much that it needs review. The reply was too short. But pretty much for all of the other discussion posts that I made, it'll give you a little tag as to whether it's relevant to the discussion topic. There's a column with the student name, and then it'll provide those evaluation notes, essentially just creating a brief synopsis of what the student is talking about. It also gives you a timestamp over here. And then here you can either see the reply directly, you can see it in SpeedGrader, or you can see the reply in context of the broader discussion as well. So again, this hopefully is a nice tool for instructors to just very quickly gather what each student is talking about in their posts without having to fully read all of the discussion posts, even though we hope they will still. But again, this kind of provides them a quick summary at a glance. Um, Keep in mind as well that if you do have the performance and usability feature option for SpeedGrader enabled, these evaluation notes will also show up in SpeedGrader. So you will be able to see it there as well. And then I'm just looking at the chat here. Jackie's saying she's been noticing that this does not work for anything longer than a sentence or two. Jackie, are you talking about this insights for discussions?
No, the translation tool for announcements and discussions. I've tried it on multiple discussion boards and announcements, and if it is like a paragraph or longer, it just sits there and just doesn't work.
Interesting. Have you by chance reported that into support, Jackie, or no?
No, I just turned it off.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's quite all right. I feel like the functionality should be that it should translate longer announcements as well. If at any point you do want to report that in, that is probably something our team would want to look at, because it should be something that's supported.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks.
Sure. Pamela's saying for discussion insights, since it doesn't consider the rubric, would you recommend pasting the rubric into the prompt to increase relevancy? I do think that would probably be a good approach, Pamela. Yeah, to have sort of the best descriptor available in that discussion prompt. I'd probably say that would be a best practice there. And then let's see. Will that have the option to see if students used AI in discussions? Yeah, not at this point, Suzanne. I see Kelly's answering that. Yeah, so for the time being, unfortunately, it would not tell you. And then the last tool that I was going to show you, I might need to turn it over to Kelly since I've been having some issues with the rubric generator in my sandbox. So Kelly, I don't know if you mind sharing your screen again.
Yeah. I think here we go. Yeah, so this would work. Basically, you've built a new assignment. I'm on an assignment details page here. If you have this turned on, the feature would need to be turned on, and the enhanced rubrics feature would also need to be turned on in the course if you have both of those on. As you create rubric, it gives you kind of a criteria builder here. You can either just generate one without prompts, or you can give it prompts like get some information there. Again, it will, of course, produce something that then the instructor will have autonomy to correct, to change, to update any way that they would like. This would, of course, just be something to get the instructor started. Yeah, again, from here out, edit, delete, change. You can reorder what the AI generation put into this builder area. If it's like, then you can just move forward with creating the rubric. Again, this one consists of a couple feature options, need to be on kind of the enhanced rubrics, and need to have this Ignite AI rubric generator turned on as well. No, there wouldn't be a notification within the UI, Greg, that an instructor had.
Kelly, did you see Suzanne's question that is there a way to change the color coding for the rubric so that it doesn't show red highlights?
And I can clarify if that,
Yeah, and
so it's not necessarily here, but in the traditional rubric, if a student scores anything less than 100%, 100% they get the little green, anything less than 100 they get red, which seems unnecessarily harsh. Is this gonna maybe fix that?
definitely not the rubric generator, but I'm not sure about the enhanced rubrics feature, if that's something we've looked at with color changing.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, Suzanne. Those seem to be just sort of built-in color schemes right within Canvas that don't really provide you the option.
Okay, thank you.
I think so. To answer Greg's question, no to the students. I'm not sure if Vanessa, you were posting that image in relation to that. The discussion summary is just a faculty-facing feature. If a faculty used the summary or the discussion insights, that's just for them to consume.
And then we also had a comment from Gregory a little earlier. I believe this is in relation to the translation, but just to confirm, Gregory says, thanks, Gus. I guess I'll have to select which language to provide for my students and maybe resend to students with other first languages. Would that be the correct workflow for what Gregory is trying to do?
Yeah, that does seem to be the case, Greg, that you would essentially need to know what the recipient's preferred language is in order to effectively use that tool.
And sorry to jump onto another Canvas feature. It still would create some work, but that could be a possible use case for differentiation tags. If you had multiple students speaking one language in the course and then a whole group speaking another, the inbox works off of those tags if that was a consideration.
Right, and maybe they're tiptoeing around it like I am. So
Thank you, Kelly. That is a great use for differentiation tags. I've been using those quite a bit this semester for some of my students who have DSPS accommodations. It's been really helpful for that as well. So thank you.
Cool.
tell me what you're talking about. This is down at the bottom.
All right, I think that we've got everything in the chat, all the
Yeah, I believe
questions in the
so.
chat. Were there any other questions that anyone wanted to discuss outside of the chat about these new? Oh, I did have one question, and maybe I missed it. Are these that are coming in the next couple of weeks, are they going to be auto turned on, or are we going to be able to make choices about them?
Good question, Christy. Anything AI is 100% your choice, so they will always be defaulted to off at the root account. Gus outlined the inbox translation. That is the one feature that's would then affect the account as a whole.
Mm.
Everything else, you can then also allow teachers to opt in at a course level.
That makes sense.
Thank you. I just like to ask that one just to confirm. Especially when
No,
you
good question. That's something we will lead with and end with when any AI discussion. Always your option with turning those tools on. It's a
Thank
very
you.
good point.
Right. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I'm not seeing any other hands or anyone that's unmuted.
Christy, I do have one additional item that I put on the agenda, simply letting everyone know that we sold all 40 of 40 seats for CCTA as of 2 weeks ago. So thank you all for participating in that, for supporting that. I think it went really well. We've had multiple support tickets that came in. Basically, we had about 32 of the 40 seats sold before the academic year started. We had about 8 extra. We overestimated because we knew there'd be some people who right at the start of the semester would email in and say, hey, is there one more seat? Sure enough, we had multiple of those come in. We filled all 40 of them. We are already working with Instructure to see what the longevity of that could be moving forward. Is this something where we could every year do 10, 20, 30 seats, something like that? So if you have any feedback from the CCTA process, I know many of you are taking the course, as am I. I'm one of those 40, and I've really enjoyed it so far. But if you have any feedback from that, I know Sharon and Laura were calling me out in the last discussion in our last course. They're picking on me a little bit, in all good fun. So it's actually been really fun to have a good cohort of us who are taking the course together. And there's students you shouldn't put in the same seats next to each other, just like in this Zoom room. Laura and Sharon are right next to each other in the Zoom room even. You just don't put each other together in the same class. But that being said, if you have any feedback for moving forward, please reach out, email me, let me know, because we're happy to continue to support that. We do see that there is still a need for that based on the number of people who have reached out requesting future seats. And as you all know, we will continue to be hiring more and more people to serve in these roles in a great way. So we want to be able to support them in this process. So thank you for that. Thank you for the support in that program. Kelly, Gus, thank you on your side for the support in launching CCTA so successfully. It's been a really smooth process thus far. So thank you all.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Garrett. And I will say that as someone who went through this previously, I was the only California Community College person in my cohort. And that is the one thing that I think I would have very much appreciated that would have enhanced my experience is if there were other of my people were in there because I had a lot of K-12 in my cohort, and so some of the things that I was trying to talk about, they had no idea about. Fortunately, having had some K-12 experience, I did understand some of the things that they were talking about, but that is the one thing that I did miss in the cohort. And kind of a follow-up to that, once you do get your certification, it needs to be continuing education. Do you know, will we be able to put together something for that kind of continuing education piece as far as cohorting is concerned?
Yeah, Christy, Jason Rock is also working on that component as well. So we did mention that we want to start thinking through what that could potentially look like. So again, I'm not promising anything at this point. It's all exploratory at this phase. But based on the success of it, we want to make sure everyone has the training that they need. So that would be excellent if we could continue this work.
Thank you. We had one question from Jackie in the browser, and Kelly sort of answered this, or excuse me, not in the browser, in the chat, and Kelly sort of answered it, and it's about the sort of AI agentic browser conversation that has been kind of rolling through some of the different discussion boards and RS feeds that we're all in, I'm sure. And Kelly, I don't know if you want to kind of handle that one also out loud for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I can share some responses we have too, if I can, I don't know if I shared it with Garrett in the past or not. I can try and track it down of some statements we have from Instructure, just speaking specifically to these type of items where just with the nature of them, it's kind of a whack-a-mole process of trying on the Canvas side to stop and prevent them. And so we've tried to more closely partner with plagiarism detecting tools and things like that to see if what they're doing and what we as a company could do to assist them in general to kind of stamp these things out. But at this point, our messaging has just been, kind of limiting out API tokens, which only goes so far, and then looking for more authentic assessments. But we don't have specific answers to kind of stamping out these new browsers popping up.
Do you know if there are any conversations going on kind of in the higher levels of Instructure about reaching out to some of these sort of larger players in the game and kind of working through partnerships to kind of build in solutions on their end of no, we're not going to allow Perplexity to take quizzes, that sort of thing? Like,
Right. Yeah. Is there potential? Instructure would be positioned to do something that we otherwise aren't, right? Which would be to, like, say, hey, OpenAI, can you blacklist Canvas sites? Because they are in the position to be capable of executing something like that in a way that Instructure isn't on the technical side, right? And obviously, yeah, it is whack-a-mole. Sure, there will be other tools that'll pop up, but at least the big ones who were are in principle trying to partner actively with higher education and with K-12 for that matter, right? To maybe have
Yeah,
the conversation that way.
that's a good point. And I can't speak to specific partners or companies. I'll just go back to the example of the issue with Google. There was a Google classroom help or something.
Yeah.
And we were able to directly speak with Google about, why are you allowing that in your browser when someone's accessing Canvas? So I think we're starting to be aware of how those relationships can be helpful with us speaking directly to the companies. Google listened, maybe some others will as well. So I do think that's more than likely our approach, is just to continue to build those partnerships with those companies.
I mean, I would also, for us collectively, say, hey, we are but a subcommittee, but it may well be that if we can mobilize voices at the top of the system level to take point on some of those conversations alongside our partners with Instructure, that might help move the ball down the field.
Yeah, and
So
If I could
just to add to that,
quickly-
guys.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to pop in really quick as well and just say, CVC has had conversations with Melissa Lobel and Sheeran as well, and we've really brought forward the concerns around agentic AI, really around academic integrity, that we want our grades to mean something. We want the behavior of students to actually be human behavior, all of those things. My sense is there is no magic bullet right now. This is like one of the concerns or the difficulties, is like, if I actually think if Instructure had the ability to stop it tomorrow, they would consider it, but no technical solution exists currently. And this is the challenge. I think it's going to be across like a wide variety of solutions. And then it'll be a constantly changing set of solutions. As soon as, one is subverted, another thing will pop up. But there's also a meeting for the AI Council on Monday that Craig Hayward is running, and I think that this topic will be under discussion at that council. Anna Mills, who is pretty big on social media, she's been talking a lot about agentic AI. I've had a couple of conversations with her myself. She will be speaking at that AI Council as well on Monday. So I just kind of wanted to share that there are additional conversations going on. We're aware of it. I'm very, very concerned about it. I think, would I personally like to see Instructure be a bit more responsive to this issue? Yes. Have I brought that up to the leadership at Instructure, which Gus and Kelly have nothing to do with, I know? Yes, and they really are aware of like our expectation as a system and as a customer that they are a bit more responsive than they have been. But I also just say that recognizing that there's like no silver bullet right now out there.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you, Marina, for sharing that sort of side of the issue with us as well. There's an interesting question that came up, Kelly, if you wouldn't mind answering this one, or giving us some insight from Sharon. If a CVC school has tokens turned off, but another homeschool has them turned on, can a student still use tokens in the teaching school?
Hey, here is a talk track. Here's how to talk.
That's when Sharon with the deep question. I'd have to, I can create a trust and test that.
Break it out.
But possibly, yes, if they're in the course in another instance, they could create one that would work in that instance.
Thank you, Kelly. I know that's a little adjacent to this committee, but I think there's enough of us on here who might be interested in that answer. So thank you for taking a look at it for us.
I would be surprised if the Trust King Mike Vogt hasn't tested that. He would probably have known that answer, but I can look into that in his absence.
Yeah, I've made a note of that one to follow up with Kelly, Gus, and Mike on that, so we have an answer during our next meeting, because I can see that being an issue one way or the other.
3 different breakout sessions.
Is Mike aware that he has earned this title?
It's a title I bestowed upon him. I don't know if it means much to him. But,
I think he would really appreciate it, actually.
Okay, there you go.
When he comes back from vacation, we'll be sure to relay that.
Please do.
However, he probably is on here right now as some other name because he did this recently in a meeting where he logged on through my calendar invite under my name, and there was two of me in the meeting, and I was so confused and I thought I was hacked. It was Mike. So he might be one of you on here right now. Just putting that out there.
The integrated.
He's not supposed to be. He's supposed to be on vacation. All right. Do we have any other particular questions for Kelly or Gus?
I think no, you're good. But I think that's kind of
See, I don't see any hands. I don't see any recent unmutings. So I guess we have a final few minutes to, if anyone has any particular questions or topics that they want to bring up before we bring the meeting to a close. Any sort of good of the order type situations?
I actually
I'll just mention quickly a chat I had with Kelly recently, something that Instructure is aware of in terms of a bug. If your faculty or you have experienced some weirdness with assignment comments, perhaps, for instance, with the course link button having disappeared like 2 months ago, they're aware of that one. That is a bug that they're aware of. So, you know, that's a thing to know about.
All right, then. I'm not seeing anything, so I think we might be about ready to wrap it up. I'd like to give you your homework assignment. Nope, Vivian, you first. I see your hand.
Yeah, sorry. I can't turn on my camera right now because I have my mom here. But I have a question for Kelly or Gus. Do you know if the student go in and change their language preferences from their profiles to a different language? Why does it not work for new quizzes?
Oh, Vivian, add another list to new quizzes, I would think. Oversight, probably. Gus and I can check into that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we can see if that's part of the roadmap, Vivian. I wasn't necessarily aware of that, but we can check with our product team to see if it's something they plan on changing in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Gregory?
Thank you. I have a question, I think, for our committee, and maybe this is the wrong place to ask it, but I'm thinking it anyway. I'm really excited about the new Canvas Career product and how that could be used for professional development. And in particular, I think it might help us facilitate the acceptance of our online training at one college versus another within our system. Because as an @ONE facilitator, it is normal for me to encounter people who say things like, I am trained to teach at college A, but college B won't accept college A's training. And so therefore I'm taking the @ONE course. I've long advocated that we allow the @ONE courses to, be the qualification for everyone in the state, but I know that's not up to us. That's up to whoever, that's probably the Board of Governors. But anyway, I'm wondering if we have thought about Canvas Career for the wonderful things that it can apparently do for professional development. Thank you.
Gregory, I can answer from a CVC @ONE perspective is we are playing around with it. There is a statewide faculty professional development work group that has also brought this up, and that is a bi-monthly meeting, and that takes place next Friday. So we haven't met since last time we've discussed this, but there could be some potential there. Of course, not in the short or the near future, but potentially maybe a fall 26 type of conversation. But of course, colleges have local control of their DE certification process. So we can, provide recommendations, best practices, but ultimately it comes down to the local colleges. DE coordinators, DE committees would have to have that discussion.
Thank you.
We've had a few webinars on the tool. Is there enough interest in this group to have like a Canvas career demo to the CCMS? Would that be of interest?
I think that would be excellent if Christy Moses, if you're okay with it. I see a lot of thumbs. Whoa, there's a whole bunch of thumbs. Wow, that was exciting. Okay. I didn't even know that many people were in this meeting. That was really cool. So yes, Kelly, I will put that on our agenda.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and guys, I will say I just shared, we recently just had a webinar on Canvas Career this past Wednesday. I have just shared the recording link in the chat if you guys wanted to see it in action. Although, again, Kelly and I would be happy to coordinate something specific for you guys to, yeah, also talk about your own particular use cases. But just in case you wanted to get ahead of this, um, yeah, feel free to enjoy that link.
Thank you, Gregory. Great question.
I've actually got a second one,
Okay.
and this is several. Well, I had positive response to the first one. So I did some testing with Ignite AI, the agent one, and I was testing accessibility, comparing Ally or not Ally, but comparing the rich content editor accessibility checker along with Pope Tech. And I also used the agentic AI, Ignite AI agent, right? The one that costs money. And the Ignite, and I asked it, can you make this page, accessible? Can you make this entire account accessible? And it said yes. And it gave me some really wonderful ideas. And when I did the page test, it caught some things that the other checkers that I used missed. And so I thought that, especially given the pending, um, you know, enforcement of regulations at the federal level, and what that might mean for us in a state that didn't vote the same way that the current president voted, and what that might mean for our regulatory environments post spring 26, whenever that date is coming up. If we have an interest in getting an Ignite AI, the agent license to help us with those efforts, because in my experience with that, just one little test, it caught some things the other tools didn't, and it also fixed the things for me and asked me if here's the fix that it applied. So I'm also interested in floating this idea of exploring this as a particular tool that would not only help with that particular issue that is coming to all of us next year, but then the other things that the Ignite AI agent can do.
And you could like game.
Thank you, Gregory. So if I'm understanding you correctly, it found the items that were subpar, but then it also fixed them.
Yep.
And then were you so because I know that we have some of the other tools that show you where the issues are, but don't actually do the remediation. So this one that with using that, it actually remediated the things for you.
Yep. Because it's an agent, right? It actually makes the changes. And what surprised me in particular was that it caught some things, like it was a really fine-tuned, it had to do with the color background for the transcript for video that was embedded on the page. And it even said that I made this, background different. So it would be obvious to users privileged with sight that, this is the transcript and it's separate from the other content on the page. And I was really impressed, and I shared it with my accessibility coordinator on my campus. And so we are interested in seeing if that's, an interesting thing to do. And I'll say also that the other thing that the agent can do is it has a really impressive, the students in need of attention, right? There's a way that you can do that, and you can facilitate access to that students in need of attention if you have other staff who are, like we at my campus, we have what's people called teaching student success coaches. And we have a way, our early alert system, we have homegrown, right? I can tag a student and then they will go out and contact the students. With Intelligent Insights Agent, it would kind of automate some of those processes to help those folks be able to identify those students who need help. There's multiple good things that we could do with this.
And it's generating several questions in the chat, Gregory. I'm wondering if you might be interested in being a guest speaker in this meeting, in a future meeting, and maybe doing a little demo, like showing us your results and sort of a show and tell for us of that, and how that works in Canvas. I think that would be really interesting, and a really great use of 20 minutes of this meeting, of our time in this meeting, if you would be so inclined, and if others are interested. I'm seeing some thumbs up popping up, so
Yeah, I'm happy to. Kelly and Gus, would you mind messaging me so that I can get some place to play? Because right now I've seen videos of other people doing it, and I wouldn't feel comfortable presenting on something unless I've actually played with the toys myself.
Yeah, Christy, I'm wondering, would it be appropriate to maybe, because Kelly and I can probably take this back and see if we can bring one of our representatives who's over Ignite Agent to kind of, because this tool is still very much in development, likely won't be available until early Q1 next year. Um, but if there is interest, we could probably bring somebody from our product team to provide you with a demo and everything that it can do.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And, we could certainly sort of schedule that for early next year, since this committee runs through June. So we could absolutely schedule that for early next year. That would be great. I think I know that many of us with small teams struggle with how do we meet those different standards, and how do we actually get to remediation when you have a small team and a large faculty base, but a small team to actually help you make those remediations. So yes, thank you. That would be lovely. That would be
Awesome.
lovely.
Yeah, we'll follow up internally on that.
Thank you. So I think we've just got like 3 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up today. So your little homework assignment for our next meeting is RSI. We'd like to talk a little bit about RSI at the beginning of the next meeting, and kind of again in that same framework as far as what are some tools that you are using that are helping faculty and students. What are some tools that you would like to have in Canvas that would maybe help your faculty engage your students? I know we talked a little bit about AI today, and I know one of the things that's always comes up is how do you have more authentic assessments? And how do we that's great to say, oh, you should have more authentic assessments, but really, how do we create those? How do we provide those tools to our faculty so that it's easier for them to create those authentic assessments? And I think a big component of that is the RSI, and with the change in the accreditation standards and ed codes, that sort of thing, I know RSI is swirling for lots of us. So please bring your thoughts and ideas to our next meeting so that we can have a chat about that. But otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next month. I hope that this month, I know is difficult for many of you as we move into the holiday season. Just know that you are appreciated, and that you are amazing and doing amazing work. And just keep going. You can do it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Hello.
I love the RSI cats, Moses.
What can I say? My colleague Stephanie was like, I don't know, maybe the faculty just need an infographic with cute cats. I sat on that for like literally 24 hours, and I was like, okay, fine, the faculty need an infographic with cute cats.
I love it. I
So
love
yeah.
it.
No, it came from fermenting on, and this is why I was throwing out there some information from fermenting on the CVC rubric alongside the ACC JC rubric for about, I don't know, at least 12 months.
Yeah.
Before I kind of landed on like, what is the ACC JC rubric even doing? Well, it's actually a lot simpler than what it looks like.
Mhm.
It's saying you should be doing these things that you do in class in an in-person class, right? That's really all it's saying. So hence RSI cats, that's where they came from.
And Moses, you have a pre-conference at OTC.
And I do. I will
regarding
be
this.
mentioning that when we get closer to
I
it.
was gonna
Yeah,
say, yeah, maybe our next meeting we do. I'll put it on the agenda right now. Just an OTC reminder, since registration is open session. Pre-conference sessions are open.
yeah.
So I will put
Yes,
that
the cats
a
will be
note.
making an appearance there. Jane and I think, are still potentially pulling in another co-presenter or two for that workshop. So yeah.
Very good. All right, bye everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Have a good one, everyone.